I was in the gallery when they took her. Not as a participant. My posting had ended 14 months prior, and I had returned to the Orvath Conclave on what the Accord called a courtesy standing, a retired attaché permitted to observe without portfolio, without voice, without standing to object. I sat in the second row of the Eastern Gallery with a cup of cold water and watched Mira Ashford stand alone at the respondents' rail below. She had been our trade envoy for the Vethani corridor for 3 years. Calm woman. Precise in her language, unhurried in her movements, the kind of person who checked her figures twice before speaking and then said exactly what she meant without adornment. I had worked beside her for the last 8 months of my posting. She was not the sort of person who made enemies by accident. She had made these ones deliberately. The conclave's complaint ran to 42 pages, which the senior adjudicant read aloud in full over the course of 2 hours. The substance was this: Ashford had filed an adverse incident report on the Vethani Corridor Accord, a report that named 3 conclave member bodies as having manipulated the inspection data used to close the corridor to Terran commercial traffic. The conclave's position was that the report was fabricated, that it constituted deliberate interference in sovereign Accord business, and that Ashford had filed it not as a legitimate trade grievance but as a covert hostile act. The remedy they had voted, in private session, 2 days before she arrived, was detention pending formal classification as a hostile agent of a non-member state. In practice, that classification carried an execution protocol. Ashford had known this when she walked in. I was certain of it then, and I am certain of it now. The way she set her case on the rail before she sat. The way she did not look at the gallery. The way she folded her hands and waited for the adjudicant to finish reading, not with the posture of someone hoping for a reprieve but with the posture of someone who has already decided the meeting is a formality. She spoke once during the 2-hour reading, when the adjudicant paused to ask if she wished to respond to the fabrication finding. She said, "I filed what the data showed." Then she was quiet again. The conclave's verification panel had been running credential checks throughout the session, standard procedure before a detention order, intended to confirm she was who she said she was and carried no undisclosed portfolio that might complicate the classification. They ran her filing history through the Accord Permanent Registry. Routine. They did it for every respondent. The result came back to the chamber display panel at the 47th minute of the second hour. I saw the adjudicant's reader hesitate before he reached for it. I saw him read it once, then read it again. Then he set it face down on the bench and asked for a recess of 5 minutes, which the chamber granted. In the gallery, I already knew. I had seen the timestamp header on the panel display from where I sat. The Accord Permanent Registry confirmation carried the credential verification the panel had requested, and beneath it, routed automatically under Standing Reciprocal Disclosure Statute, the full index of Ashford's Accord filings. The most recent entry was dated 6 days prior. Protocol 9. In the Accord's founding charter, Protocol 9 is a single page. It was written in the 3rd year of the original compact, at a time when the drafters understood that a member body might one day face a situation in which normal grievance channels had been exhausted, in which a formal complaint had been filed and ignored, and in which the only remaining course was a declaration of irreconcilable breach. Protocol 9 required 3 things: a filing body with active Accord standing, a documented record of prior unresolved complaints, and the signature of the filing body's senior authorized representative. Ashford had filed 3 unresolved complaints on the Vethani corridor inspection data over the preceding 14 months. All 3 had been received, logged, and queued into the conclave's standard review cycle, where they had remained without action or acknowledgement. Under the Accord's own procedures, that queue constituted exhausted channels. She had signed the Protocol 9 instrument herself, as senior authorized representative of the Terran Trade Mission. She had dated it 6 days before she walked into the Orvath Conclave chamber and stood at the respondent's rail. Protocol 9, once filed with the Accord Permanent Registry, carried an automatic activation clause tied to the filing body's senior representative. If that representative was detained, harmed, or subjected to adverse classification by an Accord member body while the protocol was active, the instrument entered enforcement phase without further authorization required. The filing itself was the authorization. The filing body's fleet assets, all Terran commercial and military vessels operating under Accord transit permits in the corridor and adjacent sectors, shifted to enforcement standing at the moment of activation. The recess lasted 11 minutes, not 5. When the adjudicant returned to the bench, he did not sit. He stood at the edge of the dais and looked at the chamber floor. 3 of the 7 member body representatives had already left their seats and were speaking in low voices near the rear partition. The 4th was still reading from the panel display, turning pages back and forth as though the numbers might rearrange themselves into something more manageable. Ashford had not moved. The adjudicant cleared his throat once. He said, "The panel notes a filing registered with the Accord Permanent Registry 6 days prior to this session." He paused. He said, "The panel requests clarification regarding the activation clause." Ashford looked at him. She said, "The activation clause is self-explanatory." Then she was quiet. She was taken into custody 40 minutes later, after the Conclave's legal team had completed their reading of Protocol 9 and confirmed, in writing, for the record, that there was no mechanism in the Accord Charter to suspend or revoke a Protocol 9 filing retroactively, and that the activation clause had no manual trigger, no word she could say, no document she could sign, no agreement she could reach with the Conclave that would stand the fleet down. It had been designed that way. The drafters had understood that a body powerful enough to detain a representative was powerful enough to coerce one. The fleet had been running for 6 days before anyone in that chamber knew to look. I sat in the gallery through all of it. I did not speak. I had no standing to speak, and there was nothing to say that the Accord Permanent Registry had not already said. When the chamber formally recessed pending classification review, a review that the Conclave's own legal record would later show was never completed, because the 3 member bodies named in Ashford's original adverse report withdrew from the session before a quorum could be confirmed, I gathered my things and walked out through the eastern corridor. The Accord liaison who met me at the exit asked me what I thought would happen. I told him I thought the Conclave would spend the next several weeks determining whether Protocol 9 applied, whether the adverse report findings could be challenged on procedural grounds, and whether there was any mechanism in the Charter they had not yet read. I told him they would find that Ashford had read the Charter more carefully than they had, over a longer period, and that 6 days was not very long for a fleet to travel but was more than enough time for a filing to become irrevocable. He asked me if she had known. I said, "She walked in." That was the answer. She had walked in through the main entrance of the Orvath Conclave chamber, alone, with a case on the rail and her hands folded, and she had listened to 42 pages read aloud, and she had said 7 words in her own defense, and she had waited for the panel's verification query to return from the Accord Permanent Registry because she knew what it would carry when it did. There are people who face a difficult situation and look for a way out of it. Mira Ashford was not that kind of person. She had looked at the situation, determined that there was no way out that preserved both her integrity and the corridor's commercial access, and had spent 6 days building something that did not require her to survive the room. The Conclave held her for 9 days. The Protocol 9 enforcement review concluded on the 12th day. On the 14th, the 3 member bodies named in the original adverse report withdrew their objection to the inspection data findings and requested a rescheduling of the corridor access review under neutral Accord oversight. She was released on the 18th day, which I understand was a surprise to the Conclave's legal team, who had not anticipated that the enforcement phase standing carried a mandatory release clause tied to substantive grievance resolution. She had read that part too. I was not there when she walked out. I had returned home by then, and I only heard about it afterward. But I am told she did not say anything when she left the building, and that she did not look back. That sounds right to me.